So again, linkage institutions, Unit 3, Video 11, presidential versus congressional campaigns. We're going to compare the two of those. All right, first off, presidential elections are much more competitive. Generally speaking, the presidential winner, they win with less than 55% of the vote. And as you guys look at that chart below, it shows you the percentage of the vote that presidential winners have gotten. Only twice in the last 50 years, 60 years, has it gone above 60%. Congress, on the other hand, their winner almost always gets more than 60% of the vote. If you look down at 1968, look at 1992. Both of those years, the winner got less than 45% of the vote. And you can see about half the time, the winner gets less than 50%. So presidential elections are much, much more competitive. They are much closer. Less people vote in congressional elections. Therefore, the people who actually do vote, they are much more ideological, much more partisan. That chart is showing you a comparison of presidential turnout versus congressional midterm election turnout. And you can see it's not even close. It's much higher in presidential elections than it is in midterm elections. We're talking 50, 60 million more people voting in presidential elections than vote in midterm elections, especially recently. You guys can see that gap is getting a lot bigger. So the people who do vote, they are more ideological, more partisan, meaning they're your hardcore Republicans, hardcore Democrats. So that's who you appeal to in congressional elections. This last phrase sounds a little bit strange probably. Congressional incumbents, they run as individuals, meaning that they are able to deny responsibility for the mess in the government. So they can actually come back to their district and they can run and campaign on the idea that the government is awful and that is doing a bad job. But they obviously aren't part of that problem. So they come back and they say, hey, I'm doing my best to fight against the mess in Washington, but everything is so bad and the people are so bad and they're all so mean and nobody will cooperate. They're all so evil. Vote for me again. And guess what we keep doing? We vote for them again. Now the president doesn't have that same option. I just want you to picture how ridiculous it would sound if Obama was running for re-election in 2012 and he were to come to you and say, hey, I have nothing to do with the problem going on in the government. We'd probably think, well, that's a problem. If you have nothing to do with what's going on in government, that's a bigger problem than we thought. So he can't do that. He has to take responsibility for what's happening in the government, whereas individual congressmen, they don't have to. All right, we have a term here, the coattail effect, and that arrow pointing downwards is showing you that it is diminishing, it is decreasing. The idea here is that when people vote for the president, they also vote for others from that same party. So the president would be like the guy on the front with the long coat, and all those other people, they're holders of smaller offices, maybe mayors, maybe state representatives, local judges, things like that. And they just get voted for, not because people are voting for them, but because they are voting for the president. This is implying that people engage in straight ticket voting, which, as we know, straight ticket voting is decreasing. So guess what? Coattail effect is also decreasing. All right, we have two types of voters. We have retrospective voters and we have prospective voters. Okay, this idea is pretty basic. Retrospective voting means you look backwards. You vote based on how the incumbent party has done. And Ronald Reagan, he asked this question very, very famously. He said, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And what he was basically saying is, if you are, then vote for that same person, that same party. If you're not, however, throw those people out and vote for the new party. This is what most people do. They vote, am I better off now than I was 4 years ago? This is how most Americans vote, is by retrospective voting. Some, on the other hand, engage in prospective voting. This is when you look forward. You vote based on who you think will handle the most important issues better. A lot less people do this one because this one's tougher. You have to know what the candidate's positions are and everything. You have to understand, well, what are the major issues they are likely to face, and then how are they likely to handle those specific issues. So most people don't do this one. Most people are retrospective voters. So what influences how a person will vote? Three main things. The first one is far and away the most important. Party identification. The best predictor of how a person voted is what their party identification is. Now I know we've talked a lot in this unit how party identification is decreasing, and that is absolutely true. However, if you had one question that you could ask a person to find out who they voted for, other than who did you vote for, the next best question to ask would be, what party are you? And if they tell you they're a Republican, it is a very good bet, over 95% chance that they voted for Mitt Romney. Same thing, if they're a Democrat, 95% chance that they voted for Barack Obama. So party identification, far and away the best indicator of how a person will vote. The economy also matters. When the economy is good, people vote for the incumbent party. When it's bad, they typically vote them out. And lastly is the perceived character of the candidate. So does he seem like a leader? Does he seem strong, moral, ethical, those sorts of things?